Hello and welcome to Moneylife. This is Sucheta Dalal. This week, we're going to talk about an issue that all of us are harassed about: consumer complaints with banks. And there's good news. So, the 26th governor of the Reserve Bank of India, Sanjay Malhotra, delivered a really hard hitting speech on 17th March to banking ombudsmen. They are the people that you go to when your complaint is not resolved at the first level, right? So, the governor minced no words in what he thought about consumer complaints, what are the standards that he expected, and it has frankly raised a lot of hopes. I am personally very enthused. Question is, he's 3 months into his term and he has set an agenda and a framework. But unless the RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, changes its attitude to not listening to its directions and imposes penalties on banks and has enforcement, all this will just be tough talk. So let's look at what he said. First of all, on the number of complaints. He says, and I'm quoting, not only are a large number of complaints getting escalated, a large proportion of them, nearly 57% of the maintainable complaints. And here, before I go on, you should remember that a lot of them just get rejected, saying you've done it wrong, you haven't waited for a month before you send the complaint, you have to first go to your service provider, wait for a month. If you do not hear from them, then you escalate it to the ombudsman. If you haven't followed all these technicalities, it gets rejected. So now, nearly 57% of the maintainable complaints last year required mediation or formal intervention by the RBI ombudsman. You would all agree that this is highly unsatisfactory situation and needs our urgent attention. He also highlighted a worrying surge in consumer grievances under the Reserve Bank of India Integrated Ombudsman Scheme, which means things not getting resolved and getting escalated. Complaints increased at a staggering 50% compounded annual growth rate over the past 2 years, reaching 9,34,000 in 23-24. This is the governor giving numbers to banking ombudsman at a conference. What is worse, he says, in what he calls a gross regulatory violation, banks were deliberately misclassifying our complaints. So you file a complaint and it is classified as a request or a query or a dispute so that it doesn't have to be resolved and addressed. This number is the number which are rejected like this or misrepresented or ignored is over and above 10 million complaints received by 95 scheduled commercial banks in 23-24. And remember, these are only the scheduled commercial banks. RBI regulated entities include non-banking finance companies, all kinds of startups, lenders, apps, what have you. So those complaints are not even in the picture. The others are 10 million, minus all the ones which are misclassified. Now, what does the governor want? He, in terms of setting standards of expectation, says even one consumer complaint is one too many, and they have to be handled at a systemic level. He quotes a story of Nordstorm. This is a very famous story. Nordstorm is considered a benchmark in customer service. So the story is that a customer returned snow tires and wanted a refund, which he got without any questions asked. This is at a Nordstorm store where he had bought the tires. Nordstorm does not even sell tires. They sell apparel and shoes. But because Nordstorm had acquired a retailer who had sold tires, when the customer walked in saying, I bought them at this store, the store may have changed hands, may not be selling tires anymore, but the salesman went out of his way to find out what is the cost of the tires and gave him the money saying, you're dissatisfied, here's your money back. I mean, this is completely foreign to most of us in India. We have been actually hammering our heads at banks saying, we are your customers, pay attention to us. And I mean, really, if this is the standard, we can only be amused, and we are, because a vast number of us have endured harassment due to unilateral freezing of our bank accounts without giving us advance notice and information that your customer data needs to be updated. It has to be sent 3 times as per RBI rules. But you know what happens? They don't send it. You get to know when your check bounces. The bank has absolutely no costs or consequences to destroying your reputation, possibly your business, and making you run around in loops. But the governor is aiming for prevention of complaints from even escalating to the banking ombudsman. He wants banks to handle them efficiently at the initial stage. Now, this is something that I have heard for the last 20 years, especially in the last 15 odd years. There is so much of talk. There is an internal ombudsman, there's board level committees, different governors have come and done different things. But as the governor himself said, the complaints are increasing by leaps and bounds. So Governor Malhotra wants systematic tracking and resolution of complaints, even when they surface on social media before you have had time to go beyond your angry response on Twitter or Facebook and put down a formal complaint. He wants to treat repeat complaints as systemic failures, go into a root cause analysis, and make it across the board. My goodness, imagine if this happened for KYC. He wants a two-tier grievance redress system in large entities with internal ombudsman reporting to high-ranking officers. As I said, I don't know who writes the speech, but they're already reporting to the board. I don't know where you can go even higher. So board level committees are largely ineffective. I've been on the board of Bank of Baroda. I finally gave up because I didn't think it was getting taken seriously after two chairmen had moved on. This is what happens. It starts well and it just fizzles out. In fact, complaints routed through PG portal used to be taken seriously about 10 years ago. That too has faded away. They don't care if it comes from the Prime Minister's office. So is RBI really serious about making internal ombudsmen effective? They've been around, right? And the RBI knows it's not working. In fact, in 2023, RBI set up this high-power committee under its deputy governor, retired deputy governor, Mr. Kanungo, the Kanungo committee, which said an overwhelming percentage of rejected, fully or partly rejected complaints are not even being referred to to the internal ombudsman by banks or by regulated entities. And less than a quarter of all complaints were vetted by the internal ombudsman. The Kanungo committee has provided data for this. We wrote a whole article. Those of you who want to read it, here's a link. Go to Moneylife and read for more details. Now, this led to RBI tinkering with its master directions in 2023. Effective, take a look. In Jan 2024, Deputy Governor J. Swaminathan was again talking about this. He says some entities do not escalate complaints to IOs. He's addressing a conference of IOs, which means whatever RBI does has not worked. So will the latest speech make any difference? We're going to wait and watch because we like how he started. We expect that he's going to do more. Mr. Malhotra went on to identify 4 areas where there are maximum grievances and pain. Know your customer. All of us agree with this. Digital fraud, we agree. Mis-selling by banks themselves. There is no clear solutions that he has offered on this. And aggressive recovery practices. We know how bad that is if we are borrowers who can't pay. Now, out of these 4 areas that require improvement, since he hasn't touched on many of them, I'm going to limit this column to just one, which is KYC, which to my mind is a nightmare and a never-ending hassle, and everybody agrees with this. Governor Malhotra has a solution. He says that the system provides that once KYC details are updated, they should automatically reflect on the central Know Your Customer Records Registry. This is called CKYCR. This update, when it's done, is immediately notified to all regulated entities. So if you're someone else's customer, they get an update, they know you have updated it, they can fetch the records and they can clean up the data and have it updated. They don't need to ask you for fresh documents. However, imagine this. Most banks and NBFCs have not even bothered to update your data onto this central record-keeping system that has been set up by the RBI. Their record is pathetic. Even in the case of State Bank of India, it's less than 50%. As usual, we have written about this. Here's a link to an article about how poor is the record. So if the original data itself is not there, where is the question of your update being reflected and notifications going to all RDs? Surely somebody should have informed the governor of what really is happening because it's in the public domain. We have written about it. Now, Governor Malhotra thinks that all this can be transcended by artificial intelligence. It can revolutionize grievance redress, automate complaint categorization, analyze large data sets, including social media, and detect systemic issues. He suggests that it can improve speed, accuracy, and fairness. all very true and promising. But AI will remain a distant hope if banks fail to implement basic complaint tracking mechanism, fail to update basic data, and then get the notifications. You can have a lot of technology if your basics are right and if there are consequences to you not bothering with what you have, which means stricter penalties, because technological advancements alone are not going to help. Another thing that the governor said, which we are enthused about, is that RBI plans to revise the Citizens Charter. Remember, this charter was hurriedly cobbled together in 2014. We were delighted about it, but because the original charter defined 5 consumer rights: right to fair treatment, right to transparency, right to fair and honest dealing, and right to suitability of products and services, and right to privacy, right to grievance redress and compensation. Now, if you have these rights, and if the failure of those rights lead to consequences, you have nothing to complain about. It's a perfect system. What it needs is to be made effective with penalties. We waited for 3 years, filed an RTI, and imagine the reply. RBI made it very clear it has no intention of enforcing these rights by imposing any penalties for failure. So you have motherhood statement like the 10 commandments of Moses makes no sense because people ignore them. Like I said again, unless if RBI merely identifies timelines for specific services, it's going to have no impact unless there are penalties. Those of us who are old enough to remember old style nationalized banks, we would know that there used to be a notice board with a notice stuck up there with timelines, and everything was ignored. They would sneer at you, you're waiting in a queue. So timelines, RBI should know, are meaningless without consequences to not meeting them. At Moneylife Foundation, we have repeatedly raised crucial issues with RBI and with the Kanungo Committee. In fact, many of our recommendations were accepted. Those of you who are interested, I'm putting all the links here so that you can take a look at them. One issue we raised repeatedly is stop banks from illegally freezing accounts for want of KYC. To our great surprise and delight, the Kanungo Committee said banks have no right to freeze accounts due to KYC updates. Yet, the practice continues unchecked. RBI itself has admitted in response to an RTI in Jan 2021 that it has issued no specific instructions saying freeze accounts if KYC is not updated. So we don't know how banks are doing this and continue to do it, but RBI will not act against any of them, so they get away with it. Now, banks frequently demand additional or irrelevant personal data during re-KYC, which also violates guidelines, which also has no penalties. RBI is watching and issuing circular after circular to say, I think I've said once before that there's 17 or 18 of them. All it does is issue notifications. Customers face financial losses. Their checks bounce. The bank faces no consequences. RBI is serious. Governor Malhotra is serious. He has to prohibit banks from freezing accounts for pending KYC updates, ensure that data is there on central KYC and that banks access it and get the notifications. He also has to mandate a verifiable digital record. So the bank says, we sent you 3 notices. They have to show that it hit your email box. But before they dare to freeze an account, but freezing of accounts itself should not happen. Banks don't do this. RBI doesn't ask for it. There are no penalties. This is the third thing that has to happen. Then transmission. On the death of a loved one, what happens to the assets? This is another area of harassment. We have repeatedly said, have standard operating procedures, a clear set of documents, timelines, and penalties for failure to go with the SOPs. There has to be strict deadlines to streamline this. RBI can also coordinate with SEBI, which has done this. So if one regulator can do it, say, these are the documents you can ask for, no other. This is the time in which you have to complete the processes, no more. Then RBI can do it. SEBI has also put up a central death register. I think RBI, the insurance regulator, the pension regulator, all need to get onto it. It has to be a centralized death register for everything, including property transactions. We can just hope and wish that Governor Malhotra will take a look at this and do it seriously. Finally, after a lot of lobbying, those of you who've seen our videos know we have done this, about unclaimed deposits, which are to my mind, over 3 lakh crore, but RBI itself is over 78,000 crore at latest count. After I went to the Supreme Court with a PIL, thanks to Advocate Prashant Bhushan. So there is a website which helps you track if you have unclaimed funds, but it's so difficult to search. We need a Boolean search. We have told the previous RBI governor about this. We hope Governor Malhotra will listen and take a look and make it happen. Finally, lost documents. Most of us have taken loans at some time or the other for our property or your scooter or your car. Banks take original documents, especially when it comes to property, as collateral. And often enough, in thousands of cases, they misplace them, lose them, damage them, and the value of your property is permanently diminished. Again, we have written about this at length. We have taken it up with the Kanungo Committee, which has accepted our recommendation. Nothing is happening. RBI needs to mandate that banks must provide borrowers with an affidavit cum indemnity bond if it loses documents, a certified true copy of the document in a time-bound manner, and compensation for the reduction in property value. This suggestion is there in the Kanungo Committee report, has not been implemented. Governor Malhotra has talked tougher than many of his predecessors, so we expect more from him. His words inspire hope, but unless RBI backs them with meaningful action, they will remain just that. The biggest test of his commitment will be whether he's willing to penalize banks for failing to upgrade CKYCR. This is remaining pending for over a decade. Whether he holds banks accountable for misclassifying complaints. He's identified, his words will make sense if he acts on it, and whether he enforces strict SOPs for grievance redress and asset transmission. Improving grievance redress needs regulatory action, not just speeches. Governor's push translates into decisive action. We may finally see a shift towards consumer-friendly banking with consequences for not treating us well. Otherwise, it'll be yet another case of powerful rhetoric with no follow-through. If you agree, please share this. It's about all of us. Who can afford not to have a bank account, right? And subscribe to this video. Thank you.